but I hope that when I get past the sad part, you'll find some humor. And if you didn't know about Vern's funny side, maybe we'll shed a little light on that too. The best people in our lives aren't always the ones who speak up the most or garner a lot of attention. Sometimes they're the quiet ones who are just there for us, always steady and strong. They form the bedrock of our lives. Last week, a terrible earthquake hit all of us. It cracked our foundations, and we will never be the same for it. It was so unexpected that as we continue to feel the aftershocks, it's clear we're only beginning to see how deep the damage has gone. Vern was one of my bedrocks. I knew him for almost 29 years, and I expected to know him for the rest of my life. I used to phone him from my car late at night when I was driving home alone and wanted company. One time he said, "I knew it was you," instead of saying hello. When I asked him why, he said I was the only one who called him that late. Last weekend, I was driving home from our friend Rick's house in East Mesa. It's nearly an hour's drive by freeway to get home, and we've had a problem with freeway shootings in Phoenix. I didn't want to make the drive alone, so I pulled my cell phone out without thinking and started to punch the number. When I remembered, I couldn't do that anymore, and it was so disorienting. Vern was there for me in other ways. One time, I was hospitalized for 7 days of scary tests, and my boyfriend broke up with me the next morning. I was a mess, and I didn't want to be alone. So I called Vern, and I begged him to come down, and he did. He was there within a couple of hours, and he helped me get through that weekend. And I was planning to be there for him after his surgery. I was always bugging him to come down and stay in Phoenix, which he preferred to do mostly in the wintertime, since we know what it's like in Phoenix in the summer. And he asked me to come up to Prescott, which I didn't do nearly enough. Luckily, Carla and I went up to stay with him for a few days over the last Memorial Day weekend before he started to get sick. And we had a nice, relaxing visit. I'm hoping we can all share some of our stories about Vern today, even the shy people, because this is my first time ever talking at a memorial. I'm going to tell you a few more of my memories. I met him when he came to Phoenix for a Moody Blues concert at the Coliseum on November 9th, 1986. He was wearing a blue satin Moody Blues tour jacket that was never available for sale to the public, and being the collector that I am, I knew I had to meet this guy. I found out he was living at the Grand Canyon, but he wanted to move to Phoenix. I liked him and I trusted him right away. He came down a short time later with all of his stuff, and I let him stay in the living room of my one-bedroom apartment while he looked for a new job and a place to live. He had some trouble finding both, and he wanted to give up and leave. At the last minute, I called my friends for help. In no time, he had an apartment in Scottsdale, and he found a new job. You see, I didn't know him very well yet, but I knew we were meant to be very good friends. And over time, I introduced him to just about everybody I knew, so most of my friends became his friends. Everybody liked him. He tried to leave again recently when he was laid off of his previous job. He was discouraged. He was unhappy about what the housing market had done to the value of his home, and he wanted to give up and go back to Milwaukee, which is, by the way, where I'm from, too. He wanted to go back and live with one of his brothers. He said he felt alone up in Prescott. So I harped and argued with him to be patient and give everything some time because, again, I didn't want him to move away. And eventually he found another job, refinanced his home, and he felt much better again. There were times I pushed him. He complained about it, just a little. So I tell him it was because I cared, and he always said he knew. At the beginning, Vern came across as a somewhat shy, quiet, and modest person. He liked to sit back and watch rather than call attention to himself. When I got to know him better, I realized he was quite cultured about movies and music. He loved to travel. He had political opinions. He watched a lot of documentaries on TV about anything and everything. He was also very independent and had a courageous, adventurous side. He first came to Arizona because he wanted to work at the Grand Canyon, so he moved across the country from Milwaukee. On his time off, he'd hike down and back up the Grand Canyon in a single day, completely alone. If he wanted to see a place badly enough, he wasn't afraid to take off by himself and just go. I saw a lot of potential in him, so I bugged him to let me post some of his concert photos on my Moody Blues website, Moody Blues Attitude. He didn't really want to do it at first because he didn't think they were good enough. But he relented and allowed me to put some of them up if I did all the work. So I set him up with internet accounts and put his pictures up. He was very surprised when people started immediately complimenting the pictures. Soon he photoshopped and tweaked the photos to make them look better. Then he started finding more pictures I didn't have and adding them. And as people got to know his work, they started engaging him more with comments and compliments, and then he realized how much he enjoyed the positive attention. Soon he looked forward to photographing new concerts and getting the pictures posted as soon as possible. And he also started scanning and posting his beautiful vacation pictures in our travel section. We started going to places together like the zoo to take pictures, and we began a friendly competition to try to get the best photos. Vern had a unique way of capturing hidden moments that I missed, so he challenged me to be a better photographer. Another thing about Vern was that he also had a very funny side that I think a lot of people didn't get to see. It only came out around a small group of people he trusted, and he usually had to have a drink or two before he started cutting loose. We'd be listening to music, and he'd suddenly burst out singing in this outrageous, loud falsetto that got us all laughing. And he'd do these crazy dance moves with deliberately silly expressions on his face. One time he and I were at a small party by the swimming pool at my old apartment, and he started doing this crazy dance with me, and I was laughing so hard I could barely dance myself. And the more I laughed, the crazier he got because he took the laughter as encouragement. I'll never forget the appearances of Jujana Vern. One night we were having a little Moody Blues get-together at Doug's house, and we were playing the first Graham Edge solo album. There's a stripper song on the album called Jujana Woman we were listening to, with this long, hairy, bare leg slowly dangled from behind a wall by one of Doug's stereo speakers. And Vern had hiked up his jeans and wrapped a big towel around himself like a skirt and was starting to do this outrageous stripper dance for us. And he was making these really funny faces to go with it, and I totally lost it. Tears were running down my face, and I was literally rolling on the floor laughing. Sometime later, when Ken Barnhart from Ohio was visiting, several of us went up to Prescott to visit Vern at his old basement apartment. A few drinks later, the Graham Edge album came out, and the hairy leg reappeared, this time with a tiny little dish rag of a towel over a lot less clothing. I was hysterical. We were all laughing except poor Ken, who sat like this and he didn't know what to do. And Vern loved to laugh. He had a really funny high laugh. Last year, Carla was showing us this app on her phone called Talking Tom. Vern and I had never seen it before. And Talking Tom repeats back everything that you say, but in a higher pitch, in a funnier voice. And Vern talked into it and immediately started laughing. And the silly voice came back with the crazy laughter, which got him going, which got Talking Tom going, and this thing escalated until it got totally ridiculous, and we were all laughing like crazy, including the grandkids, with these strange squeaks coming out of Talking Tom by the time it had finished elevating. We just had so many great times together being silly. The other thing about Vern was how much he loved to eat. I used to call him the walking stomach. He couldn't always make up his mind where to go when he went out because everything sounded good when he was hungry. There are times I get in the mood to cook for him too, especially lately when I finally bought my own house. He was the best person to cook for because he would eat anything I made, and he always had second helpings. I remember once at my old apartment, he was getting ready to go back to Prescott, and Chris was there, and I was scrounging around my near-empty refrigerator for something to cook. All I had were a bunch of green onions and some croutons, and I asked him if he'd like to stay for some green onion soup. It was possibly the only occasion where the stomach turned up his nose at food because he said it didn't sound very good. So as he packed, Chris and I were talking in the kitchen, browning the onions and garlic. A little while later, he walks in. That smells pretty good. He had at least 2 bowls of that soup before he left. There were a lot of good meals and a lot of good times. Strangely enough, Vern admitted to me last year he couldn't cook. No wonder he enjoyed those Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners with my family, Carla's family, and at the Watkins house. He could only bake cookies, which he brought down to give all of us at Christmas time. I think if I have any regret, it's that I couldn't get Vern to come along on one of the Caribbean cruises that I took with Carla and Ted. I really tried to talk him into it, knowing he'd love to see the museums and photographing the exotic places, and binging on the endless free food, of course. But he didn't want to spare the money, no matter how much I tried to twist his arm. I could have sworn, I almost had him convinced once. I was really hoping to wear him down someday because I know he would have had a great time. So, since I really hated losing that argument with him, I made a decision not to let the situation right now get him off the hook. So whenever I travel in the future, I'm taking a photo of him with me. He doesn't have a choice now, and I think he'd be happy to know he gets to travel for free. And if he objects, I dare him to come back and try to lock me out of my cabin. You should have received a handout with internet links where you can view Vern's photos and some video that we just rediscovered. You can download pictures of Vern for yourself, and if you're so inclined, you may want to print one of them and put it in your own suitcase so that you can bring him along with you the next time as you go traveling in honor of his memory. Thank you.